In a world where it seems totally normal to listen to a podcast about the Toronto Argonauts, it's the X's and Argos podcast.
Welcome to the X's and Argos podcast, brought to you by Funny Bone Broth. My name is Ben Grant. I'm joined as always by JB, and we've got another huge show for you today, an interview with Toronto wide receiver Juwan Brescacin that's coming up later on in the episode. Plus, there were about a dozen transactions the Argos made this week that we have to address. I want to talk about Winnipeg's stadium plan and what that could look like in Ontario. And we also have a few hints, at least for the moment, as to what BMO might look like, thanks to the Barrie Baycats, a team you may never have heard of. And we'll talk about how they play into all this a little bit later on. Plus, we didn't get a chance to last week because the story broke right after we recorded, but we would be remiss if we did not discuss Carl Nassib and the news that he made last week and all of the positives that have come out of that. So that's all coming up on this episode of the X's and Argos podcast. All right, JB, let's start things off with the signings. So the Argos made a ton of signings, which we've become sort of desensitized to over the last 2 years because they go in these sort of flurries. And this was another one of those where this week felt like the first week of free agency or something like that, where we had within the span of 1 week, I believe 7 players signed, including a couple of really big names. So why don't we start at the top? And I don't even know which one of these two is the top. It's either Ricky Collins Jr. or Dexter McCoy Sr. Let's start with the wide receiver, Ricky Collins Jr., signing out of retirement. So, how do you think this went down?
I think he's a player who still has a lot left in the tank. He's 29 years old. He's not 35. He retired after getting shafted out of his bonus, and probably needed some time to reconsider what he wanted to do, especially in the middle of a pandemic. But I think it speaks volumes about what guys think Toronto is building, that these veteran guys, and we can get to McCoy, that these veteran guys are interested in signing up with the Argos. Because if you look at Ricky Collins Jr., I think he's fantastic. I think he is, he is a CFL veteran. He had a fantastic season with Edmonton. He's a professional ball player. I see him on this squad all day. So he's not a lottery ticket or a maybe. I think he is a quarterback's best friend. He runs those inside routes. He runs those speed outs. He runs between the numbers. He's got great hands. He's exactly the kind of player you want to add into your wide receiver room. I'm really over the moon with this solid addition. Like he's not going to take over the league. He's not a superstar. His measurables are not spectacular, but what he does is catches contested balls, fights for extra yards, and is a professional receiver. I think it's a tremendous addition.
He's a really good route runner. I think he's best in the slot because that's where, as you said, he's great at those quick slants, but also the speed outs and those outside routes. A lot of the outbreaking stuff I really like with him. He has this way of he runs with a wiggle, and he sort of he dares his defensive back to kind of make a stand, to choose one side or the other, and you're always going to be wrong. He's setting you up. He's attacking your technique, your shade, and forcing you to go the wrong way. And he just always seems like he's open. Anything 20 yards or under, he's going to find space. And so that's why he made such a good W, the number 2 boundary receiver in Edmonton. But then it begs the question, what roster spot is he looking at on this Toronto Argonauts club? Because we've got Eric Rogers, who I kind of penciled in as a W. Both guys, I guess, have played at one point next to DeVaris Daniels, who I believe is going to be the X. But man, there's all sorts of possibilities here. When you add Ricky Collins Jr. into the mix with DeVaris Daniels and Eric Rogers, and of course we've got Brescacin and Dejan Brissett, who I think will be in the starting mix as well. We don't even need to mention Kendall Wright and Martavis Bryant. And so if one of those 2 former NFL players hits, man, this could be a sensational receiving core. And you don't even need those guys to hit. Even if Martavis Bryant and Kendall Wright don't turn into anything in the CFL, as you know, we know so few successful NFL players have up here. So even if that's the case, we're okay. There's enough guys that you can depend on. Like you said, these aren't lottery tickets. So I'm really excited about him. I think he's going to be on the field somewhere. I just haven't quite decided what to do with him yet. I don't know if I want him at W or if I want Eric Rogers at W. So I got to kind of sit down and figure that out. It's still too new for me.
Yeah, I think that if you're looking at these guys, they do have some overlap, but you can always find a way to get them both on the field. That you don't have to be necessarily absolutely locked in on, positional measurables. I think there still is a way to get them both on the field. And he does have some kick return, punt return experience. And, that is another area where, again, he's exactly what I love as a coach for a returner. He doesn't take it to the house, but he doesn't turn it over. He's going to catch the ball, he's going to forward the ball, and then you're ready to roll. And, I know it's not very exciting, but I do love that in a punt returner and a kick returner. I love possession.
I think I think about this more and more, I think I like him on the field side as probably the number 2 or 3, because my rationale here is if you've got Brescacin on the field side as well, there's your height, and you've got Eric Rogers on the other side for height, just to kind of balance it out a little bit. I don't know if I like Brescacin and Rogers playing next to each other. And so I think that's how I would sort of settle that. Obviously, everyone moves around in a variety of different formations, but I think that would probably be how I would set things up. This signing has the John Murphy pinball combo all over it. I guarantee you, John Murphy is the guy that brought in Ricky Collins. He was a huge Ricky Collins Jr. fan when he was with Saskatchewan. He was responsible for bringing him in over there. And so I think John Murphy's the one that decided the Argos needed to bring him in this time too. And I think probably pinball went in to close the deal, because if anybody can talk a man out of retirement, it is Michael Pinball Clemens. And so I think that's exactly how this went. John Murphy's like, Pinball, we need to sign this guy. And Pinball's like, let me make a phone call. And 2 minutes later, he's signed. So that's, I think, how this went down. All right, let's move on to talk about Dexter McCoyle Sr. So defensive back. This is a pretty big signing too. I think he's starting somewhere. I don't even know where yet, though. What do you make of this signing?
Yeah, I love it too. I think, again, you're talking about a guy who has, CFL experience. He played for a year on the Chargers roster, and so that speaks to his measurables and his talent. And he has CFL experience. I mean, he won Rookie of the Year in 2014. For Edmonton, and once again, we're adding this guy, from out of nowhere, and I think he has tremendous flexibility with what you want to do with him. He's 6'4". You can put him in the box. He's big and strong. I mean, he can play the run. You can blitz him. He can jam big receivers, but also he has the hands to play center field. I think you have lots of places you can put him. I think he's an absolute steal to add this late because of his flexibility, and even though he doesn't necessarily look blazing fast on film, I think it's deception. I think it's deceptive because he has a sort of long gait. But he covers ground in a hurry, and he hits like a ton of bricks. So you could easily see him playing free safety or Sam linebacker. I think when you can add a guy who has that level of flexibility, positional flexibility, I think you've really hit on something.
Yeah, he's always been great in his time in the CFL. Like you said, he was the Rookie of the Year in 2014. I think he was an All-Star that year too with Edmonton. And then in 2015, he wins the Grey Cup. He's a West All-Star again. And like you said, he actually played with the Chargers. He wasn't just spending time going from practice squad to practice squad. He got a lot of playing time in 2016. And he had a brief stint back in Calgary in 2019, and that was the film that I wanted to look up. because I was curious to see where Calgary was using him, because that to me would be an indicator as to what Coach Dinwiddie maybe had in mind. Obviously, he's brought in his whole Calgary crew, and this, I believe, is now the 11th former Stampeder that has been added to the roster, not including coaching staff. And so looking at what Calgary did with him, they signed him very late in 2019. He was only on the roster for the last 2 games and then for their brief playoff run. And they mostly had him at that Sam Backer spot. But when you look back at his 2014 film with Edmonton, they had him all over the place. They were playing him at field half. They played him a little bit at free. And then I think most of the time seemed to be at Sam. Now, most recently, he was playing in the XFL with the St. Louis Battlehawks. And kind of interestingly there, 2/3 of his snaps were in the box. So even though he was actually listed as a safety, they had him essentially playing a linebacker spot in the XFL. So it really could be anything. My instincts are telling me they're planning on him being Sam. And I know we've brought in a lot of guys recently where we've said, this guy could be a Sam, but we've also lost a lot of guys that we were kind of roughly penciling in as Sams as well. So I think that's the position that they've been continuously searching for. So I think that's probably what they have in mind. But if they really needed to, it's a guy, like you said, we could send him back to safety. You could see him in those halfback spots, especially to the field side. So I think he's a huge signing. I fully expect him to be starting week 1. I don't know where, but I think if I had to bet, I'd say at Sam. The rest of the signings that the Argos went through, I don't think any of the rest of the guys are people that we're penciling in as starters per se, but there's some interesting ones. So defensive lineman Eli Howard, not to be confused with Eli Harold, who is also a defensive lineman. It's so strange to have 2 Eli H's within the same positional group. He's a really interesting story. So he's got a master's degree in financial planning. He was a 3-year academic All-American. And he was actually a quarterback at one point who switched to defensive line, which doesn't happen a lot. And I think the only reason that Howard wasn't an NFL draft pick is because he ended up with a knee injury that cut his season short in 2020. And he's also had a little bit of injury history, some ACL issues over the years. So I think that is what was preventing teams from taking a chance on him. But he's a young guy. He's a lethal pass rusher. I didn't think too much of his play against the run. But there's sort of an interesting question with him. Like, JB, what do you think you do with a guy who, because his plan is to get back into the NFL. There's no question about that. He had a little bit of a look with Atlanta. They let him go. But I think he believes he still has the talent to play there. And in the NFL, he's definitely an edge rusher. He's playing on the outside. Here, though, at 280 pounds, you could see him on the inside. What do you do with a guy like that where he wants to play on the outside because that's where he sees his future, yet he might make a really interesting 3-tech? How do you sort out positionally a player like that?
Well, this goes back to earlier conversations we've had. It really speaks to the player. What is the player willing to do? Is the player coming up here with a belief that they can dictate and that they are, ready to dominate this secondary league on their way to the NFL? I hope not. I think hopefully he is putting himself in a position to do whatever is required. Because I don't think the NFL, is going to care what his CFL film is. I really don't. I don't think they're going to look at his CFL film and go, wow. But, the NFL is going to look at his measurables. The NFL will look at his college tape. And, if he gets an invite, then he gets an invite and he'll get a look. I wouldn't worry about positional film. If it were me, I just don't think that's something the NFL is going to be swayed by. I love the idea of guys who rush being inside. I love having that mix. Of having a guy who has pass rush moves and a quick step on the inside, because that's often an area that can be exposed because teams are just not ready for it. They're looking on the outside and they're chipping and they're double teaming. And if you have a edge rusher's first step, but you can be on the center, I think that's fantastic. That's where I would hope he would ball for us, because I think that makes the most sense at his size in the CFL.
He could play anywhere along the line, I think, and I don't expect him to be someone that comes in and thinks they're going to say, this is what I'm doing. He's a team leader. He's been a captain. I expect him to be a team player and just basically say, put me wherever I can be most helpful for the team. He seems like that kind of player.
Again, I love it. I mean, he's more of a lottery ticket than the other two, but he could be a really productive player. I don't think you need to be wearing, rose tinted glasses to see the potential for him to be, part of this. I mean, I'm extremely rotational defensive line.
And he will be more than willing to sit down and listen to those guys. I read a story about how he ended up on a Zoom call with Bruce Smith, and he ended up taking pages of notes out of that meeting because he was just so excited to learn from somebody that had been there and done it before. And so,
love it.
Imagine how much fun he's going to have in that room with Charleston Hughes and Odell Willis and Shane Ray and all these other guys. He's going to have a full encyclopedia full of notes by the time the season's done. So I'm excited to see him in camp. The other signings, we've got a linebacker, Eli Menser, another Eli added to the team. He's going to be a CFL linebacker, but it's weird because he hasn't really played the position before. He was at Albany, and he didn't really see consistent playing time until he was in his senior year, and there he was primarily used as an edge rusher. He's probably going to be a MAC in the CFL, but never having played there before probably means he's going to need an entire year at least to get things sorted out. So I wouldn't be surprised to have him make the practice squad, but I would be surprised to see him dress. And then you've got a pair of defensive backs, Shamar Busby, a Canadian. This is probably depth to the field corner position where I expect we'll have the Canadian defensive backs lined up. He was at Southeastern Louisiana. He didn't get a lot of tape down, but he was taking reps at corner. The only place I really got to watch him play on film was Spring League. He was playing for the Alphas. They had him playing. Playing some slot corner, and I didn't really like him there, to be honest. So I would rather have him on the outside anyway. So I think that's probably more of a depth move. The Arrows also signed defensive back Andrew Soro, who's a project, but a really good project. He's going to need at least half a season to get himself ready. He's another guy I could see at Sam or Free, but he could potentially play halfback if his man coverage gets a little bit better. He had a great career at Florida Atlantic, and he was almost exclusively used as a linebacker. But he was undersized for that spot in pro football. He's 6 feet, 206. And so the Kansas City Chiefs got a hold of him. They decided, let's move him to free safety. And that's basically where he spent the 2019 preseason. And then the New York Guardians of the XFL decided to keep him at free in 2020, but he still looked a little bit uncomfortable in space, as linebackers often do. And so we just have to see if that's something that will grow on him and he'll become accustomed to, and that man coverage will be on par with the athleticism that he shows. But for right now, I think he's an exciting project, but still a project. And then the last guy we need to talk about is running back Greg McCrae, 5'10", 175. He looks a lot like the rest of the running back crew, a little more slight than the rest of the guys we've got, but not an overly tall guy. Excellent vision with the ball in his hand. He looks terrific, but he's not a great receiver, and he's not terrific at pass protection. And those are two pretty big misses. Now, with these signings, of course, it means two players were released. Chris Humes, which I'm stunned by. I was really excited about Humes. And Jason Beck. So Humes first, just a quick word on him. I think the reason I'm so surprised is because he was one of the first players that Coach Bell wanted to talk about when I interviewed him a few weeks back. We were talking about halfbacks and potential sandbackers, and that was the first name that Coach Bell brought up. And I really liked watching what Humes did in Winnipeg, and I had him penciled in starting at field half. And so I was very surprised to see him released. But like the guys we talked about last week, we don't know what the reason behind it is. It could be any number of things. And Jason Beck is somebody that I was really excited about, not for this year, but down the road, because He's a linebacker whose coverage skill is excellent. He played at Eastern Michigan. He was outstanding, honored in several different ways in the MAC for his fantastic linebacker play. He lined up a lot in the slot as well. His coverage is really good. His speed is great. Hits like a truck. And so I was very excited for him to spend a year under all these other guys learning that position. But unfortunately, that is not to be as well. And so Chris Humes and Jason Beck, I'm sure they'll be picked up somewhere. And I'm sure this is not the end of football for either of those guys. They're terrific players, but it is the end of them as Toronto Argonauts, which is sad. Earlier this week, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers announced that they would not have a stadium cap. 100% of their stands would be open and filled. The condition that everybody must be fully vaccinated. JB, your take.
It's exactly what we've been talking about. It's only following the science that if you have received both vaccinations and 2 weeks have passed since your second vaccination, if you can't watch an outdoor sporting event, then what the hell are we doing? It has to be possible. It has to be what the science says. You just can't restrict people from watching outdoor sporting events because some people won't get vaccinated. I absolutely applaud Winnipeg for following the science and saying, we're not telling you to get a vaccination, do whatever you want, but you can't come watch football. And I would love to see Toronto do the same thing. And I think it's outrageous if the province does not support this, because there is no reason for restriction on the attendance if you are fully vaccinated. It is just the science. And I really get frustrated by it, because if the government is telling us you can't watch a sporting event double vaccinated, then we should just shut everything down. What are we talking about? How are we going to have school? How are we going to have businesses? To pretend like double vaccination is not a major milestone is, just anti-science and anti-logic. So I salute Winnipeg, and I certainly hope that Ontario is watching and that the Argos are pushing for this, which I'm sure they are behind closed doors.
It just makes sense. It's a very logical thing. Now, I don't know. I don't think we're going to see that in Ontario. I don't think we're going to see that same thing. The two provinces have handled themselves very differently on a number of issues, and I don't see us following in only allowing fully vaccinated fans into stadiums. But where I think we may get a little bit of a tip as to what this is going to look like is by looking at the Barrie Baycats. So the Barrie Baycats are a semi-pro inter-county baseball team. They play out of Barrie. They play out of Coates Stadium, which seats just a little under 2,000, about 1,900. They've got sort of a surround home grandstand, and then they've got these auxiliary stands by first base and third base. And what they've been told by the province is that they can allow, starting this Thursday, it's next Thursday, July 8th, their first home game, they can allow 25% of the tickets to be sold, which is about 475 people that will be allowed to watch that event. And I was kind of reading through some of the fine print there. Masks are mandatory when you come through the gate, but then they're recommended, not mandatory after that. So in your seat, you actually don't have to be masked watching the Barrie Baycats play baseball. There were a few things I thought were kind of interesting about that whole setup. What's your take on this?
Again, it is really frustrating that there doesn't seem to be any science guiding any of these decisions, that people are so scared to make decisions and are not listening to scientific experts about what are we going to do. I don't know what to make of it. I don't like it. I think that's great. And certainly we should be able to apply that to the Argos, where that percentage of fans can come in and watch. So, I mean, it definitely suggests that we should have a minimum of 7,500. I think it should be much more than that, but I could live with 7,500.
Last week, Carl Nassib of the Las Vegas Raiders made a huge wave in sports media by saying that he was gay. And he also, and I think one of the stories that was sort of lost in this was that he also donated $100,000 to the Trevor Project, which if you don't know about, you should read about it. It's a fantastic initiative. And I think that sort of got missed in what was otherwise a big story. What upsets me about this is that, and we talked about this a little bit, I don't know if it was last week or 2 weeks ago, it shouldn't be a story, right? Like that would be the best thing if this wasn't news. If a pro athlete mentioning that he's gay wasn't a story, I think that would mean we're in a pretty good place. But we're not there. We're not even close to there. And I think this is an amazing thing that he has done here. And he's, in my mind, not only saved lives with his announcement, but he's also allowed people who believed that they couldn't follow a dream to maybe think that this is in fact possible. This is something they can do. This is a pursuit that they can have. And I applaud the courage that it took him, because I know there's no way this could have been easy. Carl Nassib didn't make this announcement last week for himself. This will make his life a lot more difficult. There's no question about that. This was selfless. This was altruistic. This is him wanting to help other people who are struggling. And he basically mentioned as much in the video that I'm sure you've seen by now. But yeah, I just thought this was an amazing moment. It came on the heels of something we were talking about last week. And I would just like to, applaud his courage in making a statement like he did.
Yeah, it's great to see. I think that it shouldn't be underestimated. And sometimes people, respond with like, well, who cares? And like, that's such a disingenuous response, because clearly, the NFL and this, professional football is largely very conservative, often homophobic environment. So the fact that a professional football player is coming out during his playing career is a huge deal, and will be, I think, for the foreseeable future. So it definitely should be celebrated. I think the big question now will be how the season goes for Carl. He's pretty locked in as a roster player, but it's going to make things complicated. Will he break camp with the Raiders? If he is let go by the Raiders, will another team pick him up? I think what happens this year is as important for changing the culture moving forward, because people are going to watch and see how he's treated and whether he's blackballed, because we know the NFL is fully capable of blackballing players and openly. So, that's my hope, that this year goes really well for him, and that that there are not significant issues around it. I would have loved to have seen the CFL and really even the Argos, but certainly the CFL take a stronger stance in support of it, especially during Pride Month, especially since everything's all painted up with a rainbow. And, I think it's really important to celebrate that. If you're going to paint everything with the rainbow, then you should be all in on this. And I think that was a missed opportunity for the CFL.
All right, it's now time to get to my interview with Toronto wide receiver Juwan Brescacin. If you want to see the interview in its entirety, the full video is available on our website, xsandargos.com, and you can find it on our YouTube channel. I would like to welcome back to the X's and Argos podcast a friend of the show, Toronto Argonauts wide receiver, number 11, Juwan Brescacin. Juwan, thanks so much for taking time today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here again.
Of all the stuff that you've done over the last year, whether it's the video game interactions on Twitch or Mental Health Mondays, the charity work that you've been involved in, like, what are you most proud of the stuff that you've done away from the football field over the last year?
I couldn't pick one thing, but I would say I'm most proud of just stepping outside my comfort zone, because throughout my career, or, just my life as an athlete, I've kind of just limited myself, I feel like, because I was scared of, maybe what people thought, if they thought like what I'm doing is genuine, or if they thought it was coming from a good place. So I just kind of just said, whatever, and I was going to just do what I felt like I wanted to do. And everything that I've done has come from a place of just love and care for other people. And, I just like interacting with people. I'm what you call an introverted extrovert. So if I don't really know you that well, I won't really talk that much, but I do enjoy having conversations with people and talking to people. And, I just wanted to do something with my year off of football. And I just was kind of pulled to, I would say, serving people in a sense. And that's kind of where I want to continue to go during my football career and after my football career. So, I would just say like I'm mostly proud of just kind of diversifying myself and just stepping out of my comfort zone.
I haven't been able to catch all of your events, but the one that I went to that I thought was amazing was the Capes for Kids initiative that you did with Holland Blue Review. That was amazing. It was not like the best part of it is to be able to raise awareness, to be able to raise that kind of money for that it's going to go towards those kids, and it's such a special campaign. I thought that was truly fantastic.
Yeah, I was really happy to be presented the opportunity by the Argos. Julia DiNardo, I think that's how you say her last name. Julia, if you're watching this, don't get mad at me. But she reached out to me for that, and I took it right away. I thought it was a great initiative. My Twitch following, they love the charity streams, and also it gives CFL fans an opportunity to interact with a CFL player. And I just kind of just like bringing all that stuff together. And I mean, we ended up raising about $6,000 when the target goal was about 1,000, and we raised like 1,500 before I even started streaming. So I enjoy myself, and I'm happy that the viewers enjoy themselves too. I see myself as a bit of an entertainer sometimes.
No, absolutely. And that was the first time I've ever tuned in to watch someone else play video games also. So I'm not from a demographic that really understands the appeal to it, but I actually found it to be really fun. I was watching, you and Deveris and, a few other guys out there playing Call of Duty. I got to know though, having seen some of your tweets about the games that you've played, I want to know, of the CFL players you play with, you got to tell me who's the best and who's the worst video game player.
I'm trying to think of everybody. I played with a decent amount of CFL players so far. I put Brandon Bridge. I'd put him up there. I know he's retired, but Bridge is pretty good. He's really good actually, and he's probably surprised that I said his name because we have that have that brotherly relationship where we we'll never admit that the other person is better than the other. But I would say Bridge. And usually I would say Devaris is the worst, but someone has taken his place, and his name's Charleston Hughes. I've posted a few clips playing with Hughes, and every time we play, something happens to where I'm like, what were you thinking? And he just says, come on, JB, I'm old.
I half expected you to come out with Ucambry.
No. He's actually good. He's good.
Because I feel like every time you post a clip, it's Ucambry crashing a helicopter into a tree or something like that.
No, he does funny things, but he's actually a good Call of Duty player. So you get a mix of both.
So the last time you were on this podcast, things were pretty different. We were talking about how exciting it would be to have you lining up next to Nate. We were talking about Matt Nichols as your quarterback. You've had like 35 teammates move on to other things and other teams. What's that like as a pro athlete? Like, I know that's part of the business, but this is pretty weird, isn't it?
Over this past 2 years, I just kind of gotten used to weird and abnormal things. So I've had the mindset to just go with the flow, even though I've usually been like that. When football was canceled, I was kind of trying to fight it and, was stressing about stuff. But now I just go with the flow, and I don't think it will be that crazy of an adjustment just because we didn't play last year. And you know, I was going to line up with new people regardless. So I guess the good thing is, although I'm lining up, with some new people and we have a bunch of talent in the receiver room, there's also a lot of familiar faces on the team. So it doesn't feel that like too much of a transition as far as going from Calgary to Toronto. But at the same time, I'm excited to, meet my teammates that are on the roster now.
Yeah, it's so strange because you're coming to a new team and yet you know the team a lot better than the fans do because this is a really new team for us. These are guys that we haven't seen playing in Toronto, but yeah, there's a good 10 guys here that you've played with and guys in the coaching staff as well. And, I was thinking about this the other day. Like Coach Dinwiddie has been the Toronto coach now for about a year and a half, and we really don't know too much about him, but you do. So what can you give us about RD? Something about his coaching style? Is he the kind of guy that is telling war stories of himself as the quarterback? Is he challenging defensive players and saying, Shaq, we're coming for you this play, look out? How's RD on the field? What's he like as a coach?
I would say the best way to describe RD is he's competitive. He's also a great football mind, and he probably became even better being part of the Calgary staff. So I say that RD is definitely competitive, but then he also is a player's coach as well. So if you come to him with something, he'll listen to you, whether it's in your personal life or whether it's on the field. If you see something, he's not too proud to take your opinion and apply it, or take what you're seeing and apply it to what's going on in the field. So I've always liked that about him. But RD just wants to win, and I think if you look at the roster that he's put together, and from guys who were in the NFL, from guys who were good players in Calgary or on other teams, that it shows that he doesn't just want to come in and compete his first year. He wants to go all the way to the Grey Cup.
And I think this might be a roster to do it too. It's getting pretty exciting. Feels like every week the CFL has yet a new reason to hate the Toronto Argonauts because somebody else just got brought in, a huge name, and week after week that continues to happen. So that's pretty exciting. So you guys are going to be at the University of Guelph, which is an awesome facility. I think it's a great place to have training camp. Are you guys staying on site? Is that how that's going to work?
I honestly, I don't know. I'm just showing up and just being like, just tell me where to go and just get ready for camp. But I have been to Guelph multiple times. I had the opportunity to work with their football team a couple of times on my bye weeks when I was in Calgary. So I'm pretty familiar with the campus, and they have a great locker room. They have a great field. So I think that it'll be a really good training camp.
I'm wondering if it's going to be a bit like a road trip where you basically are paired with somebody and you got a room and everything else, sort of like the old way that like NFL teams, a lot of them used to do it that way. They've gone away from that a little bit, some of them now, but that's always such a cool bonding experience. I think that would be a great way to go to have Dinwiddie putting thought into who am I going to pair with who, how am I going to lay this out. I don't know if that's what is planned, but I think that would be pretty cool. Who would be your roommate of choice if that was going to go down?
My roommate of choice would probably it'd be either Davaris, Eric, or Dejan Brissett. I'd probably lean more towards Dejan just because I'd have the opportunity to kind of just mentor him a bit and teach him the playbook and just answer any questions that he has. But at the same time, like, he knows that he can always text me, call me, or ask me whatever. He's like a little brother to me. But then Davaris and Eric, those guys, we just were in Calgary and we know each other. So, but I'm usually you're paired with somebody during camp. So I don't know if it's going to be somebody I know or if it's going to be somebody I don't know, but I'll get to know them either way.
So every receiver's got a favorite concept, one where you're like, I know every time we call this, I'm going to be there. I'm not asking you to go into specifics of the Argos playbook or anything like that, but it could be a concept that goes back to Calgary or back to your time in university or high school. Is there one play where you're like, I know I'm going to be there when this is called?
I would say for me, like anything with just a post route.
That's your favorite? Always post?
Yeah, just because Playing in the slot and being someone who, just picks up speed as they run, I always feel like it just gives me a better opportunity to be open. So whenever those are called, I'm running that full speed because I always think that I'm going to score a touchdown on those. So, yeah, I would say anything with the post route.
You see that free safety drifting to the other side of the field, you start
Yeah.
getting excited, trying
Or
not
he
to
comes
show it.
down a bit. Yeah.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. Maybe they're sending him, maybe it's zero.
Yeah.
That's exciting. So anything with a post, we're looking for you going deep.
Yeah.
What we try and do sometimes on the show, I take some pride in the fact that we're trying to create better football fans. And we've got a lot of really nice feedback from listeners and viewers who have learned some things about the game, whether it be X's and O's or just some of the little intricacies of the game. And one of the comments we always get is people are surprised at how much mental work is going on before the play is snapped and even after the ball is snapped and the play is underway. Can you take us through like the things that you think about, some of the responsibilities you have after you break the huddle? Maybe you've got, maybe there's a read for you, or maybe there's maybe there's a check with me, or you're hot, or something like that. What's the process like when you leave the huddle and you're getting lined up?
Whew. Okay, so it's a lot going on at once, which is why I feel like athletes don't get a lot of credit for the things that we do, because it takes a lot of, mental strength and, attention to detail all within 20 seconds, especially in the CFL. So I mean, mind you, even in the huddle, you have to pay attention to the plays because it's telling you exactly what to do. It's telling you where to go. It's telling you what your route is, or if you have a blocking assignment. Then you break the huddle, and depending on what position you're at wide receiver, you have to. Well, all the positions have to look at, the SAM, which is the field linebacker, to the safety, to the halfback, to the corner, because if they blitz, you may have a hot route, right? So if I'm running a go route and I'm the hot read, I'll have to run a slant if one of those DBs blitz, something like that. And then depending on if you have pass protection, sometimes in our offense, the receivers come in and they have to block a blitzer, right? So you have to know who's blitzing. And you also have to know the line call, because that tells you something. And then you also have to pay attention to the snap count, right? Sometimes you go on 1, sometimes you go on 2, sometimes you go on 3. And then so when the ball is about to be snapped, sometimes the defense may change they may change their defense. So you may be getting pressed and then your guy may back off, and you have to change the way you run your route within that. And then on top of that, if the ball comes your way, you have to make the catch. And then after the catch, you try and get as many yards as possible. So it sounds like a lot because it is a lot, but at the same time, when you've been doing it your whole life and you're comfortable in the playbook, everything kind of moves slower. But when I first started playing the CFL, everything was moving so fast. I was so confused, but now I feel like everything is just, slow, and I can see things differently. So yeah, there's a lot that goes on within those 20 seconds.
Do you prefer, because in terms of simplicity and getting more complex, offenses are generally sort of the same at the end of the day, but the language is often very different. Do you like the complex play calls where everything is basically, it sounds confusing, but everyone's got their job in there? Or do you like the sort of simple play calls where you now have some memory work to do? Like, do you want to hear West right tight, F left, shift W right, 372, X stick, Z spot? Or do you want to hear something like, Panda 89?
Yeah. Honestly, I feel like I can go with either one. And I feel like both offenses that I've been part of, they do a bit of both. But I think sometimes, depending on the situation, that it helps to have a shorter play call. So maybe it's just a one-word call, and it tells everybody what they have, right? Because then you can just say that, and it allows you to just go fast. But then sometimes, if a guy forgets what they have, then it can mess the whole play up, because football is the ultimate team sport. Everybody has to be on the same page for things to work most of the time. So that's the one knock I would say that I have against shorter play calls. But I mean, at the end of the day, we're supposed to know what we have. So
When Argos fans saw the revised schedule, we all kind of had to take a seat. What was your reaction when you saw the 2021 schedule?
I was just excited. I really didn't care who we played, who we started with. Everybody's in the same, starting off in the same spot, basically. Nobody's played football since 2019. And yeah, Winnipeg was the Grey Cup champions in 2019, but we're all starting from scratch now. And we don't even know who's showing up to camp. Every day there's people that are retiring, and you're seeing all types of stuff like that. So I think that CFL fans in general should just be excited that the CFL is back, and just enjoy the games.
Well said. Any DBs you've got to settle some scores with? Anyone you've circled and you're going to go over pregame and say, hey, we're going to dance today?
Not really. I'm not much of a talker on the field, anyways. The most talking I'll do is in practice, probably to Shaq Richardson or Alden Darby, because those guys talk a lot, but it's all in good fun. And just looking to compete with those guys. We have a great group of DBs in Toronto, so I feel like every day is going to be competition, and I feel like that's the best way to prepare us for the season.
Any special feelings about walking back into Calgary for that first game, especially knowing who you've got around you? The fact that it's not only Coach Dinwiddie and Coach Bell into the breach with you. It's Nick Arbuckle, it's Eric Rogers, Robertson Daniel, Asnel Robo. You can even include Cordero Law too. Tavares, I guess, Daniel Braverman, Ricky Neal, Shaq, Dexter McCoyle now too. Like, are you guys? Is there an extra excitement? How do you feel about it?
I would say there may be a time where I forget what team I play for, because to leave Calgary and then have my first CFL game back in Calgary it's super weird. It's funny how things come full circle, but no, I just there's definitely some great memories in McMahon, great memories in Calgary as a city. I love the city, and I'm just looking forward to that game because it does feel like a second home. By the same time, I'm back home. I'm actually back home. So I think a lot of us that played for Calgary that are on Toronto are looking forward to that game as well.
You just got to make sure you don't pull a Norm Powell when he was with the Blazers and walk to the Raptor bench because he kind of forgot where he was. I don't want to see you walking to the Calgary bench.
Go in the Calgary huddle.
Exactly. Juwan, I want to thank you so much for doing this. You've been really generous with your time. I really appreciate it. Have a terrific training camp, and I can't wait to see you out there.
Thank you. Thank you for having me as usual.
Juwan Brescacin, wide receiver for your Toronto Argonauts. Well, that will just about do it for us on this episode of the X's and Argos podcast. For JB, my name is Ben Grant saying so long, and may all your pre-snap reads be good ones. I'll see you.